my own personal mantra of how I approach life. And that is, I want my life to feel very fancy. And when I say that, not necessarily like, I don't need to be a billionaire. Actually, I don't desire to be a billionaire, although I've created billion and trillion dollar products. But what I do desire is a life that really reflects what I enjoy and pleasure. So that's the fancy part. And the lazy part is about like, I want to be able to stack my success in a smarter way. I'm very strategic. So I'm like, people work way too hard to have the life they want. And I'm like, so everything I look at is like, how can I make that fancy lazy? How can I get it like the big success, the fancy part, and then do it in a way that to other people looks easy, but it was worth doing.
Step into the world of success with Your Brand Amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. Jen Kim is known as a top brand strategist from Forbes and from many, many other places that have given her accolades. And Jen, I have to say this is absolutely true. As you know, your team sent me a copy of your book, Unicorn Team, with a nice little note from you. I reached out to you on LinkedIn to thank you. And that was the start of this relationship and having you on the podcast. And that was one of the most, it's not unique necessarily, but it kind of is, because most people don't send books to people that they haven't met already. I get a lot of books from people who've already pitched me to be on the podcast, but this was the first time I got one unsolicited. And that, of course, made me pay a lot of attention and go, wow. And then I posted about it. And then some of my students at USC were like, I have that book. I've seen her speak. So just a wonderful feeling, right? To have been on your list and to be able to strike up a conversation and have you be so welcoming. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reaching out, because sometimes, you do that and, you happen to be on a list that actually was curated for me with the publisher as well as, my own internal team, because we really wanted to put aside a bunch of books for founders or people who were, speaking about various things specifically around reimagining yourself, innovation, creativity. And I really feel like a book can open up a conversation. And it was delightful to hear from you as well. So glad we're together now.
Me too. And I will share one more thing. I also put it in my newsletter. I'm on the Intuit Small Business Council. One of my friends on the council, Dana Znofri of Anna Oro, also received a copy of the book. And because I posted about it in my newsletter, she reached out. She's like, oh, I also got this book. I wasn't sure how I got on a list. I'm like, here's what I was told, and here's why you got it, because you are one of those women who's innovating, creating something new, and not afraid to stand up for the experiences you've been through and for your brand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get to this role? You've had several businesses. I know you grew up in Hawaii. I'd love to hear a little bit about what was it about brand that compelled you to do all of this research, create this amazing book, which anybody who's watching this can see, Unicorn Team right behind you, and to have this amazing career that you've had so far that I know is really probably only beginning. I'm sure you have a lot more you want to do.
Yeah, it's a new season. It's like, pun intended, it's a whole new chapter, for me now that I've, taken my 20 plus years of being in, brand strategy, go to market, and both running my own businesses, but also being that rainmaker and mastermind behind a lot of the brands that we kind of take for granted today. Even me, like I kind of sometimes forget, once something becomes what I call mainstream or default mode, where you're like, oh, that's something I do, or that's how I behave, or that's how even the car I buy, the TV I watch, the computer that I am on right now and talking to you, these are all things that we forget as consumers and as humans that was innovated by somebody. Somebody, it was a seed in their mind to bring it forward. And So, my career is a long winding yarn, but just kind of the high points is I did grow up in Hawaii. I grew up in a tiny little plantation town. My grandparents were immigrants from the Philippines, and they were working for 35 cents an hour in the sugar plantation field. So I literally grew up in this melting pot of like different cultures and ethnicities. And I did definitely come out of the chute, my mother will tell you, pretty different. Like, definitely more questioned a lot. For those of you who understand a bit of Asian culture, that's not really the thing that you do. You're more compliant. You go and pursue a more traditional path if you can. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. But for me, I was always that young person asking why. Like, why is it like this? This doesn't make sense. Or like, and because I grew up in a tiny little rural town, the additional layer of not having as much exposure to the bigger world, I was lucky in that my parents identified really early, like, okay, she's a little different. She's curious about things. So I'm really grateful that my parents really invested in my education. And we traveled a lot. It wasn't like we were just in the little town. We were humble, but my parents brought us around the world. We traveled at least once or twice a year. We flew to like California, and we drove across the US to Washington, D.C. when I was little. And so for those experiences, I'm really grateful because it allowed me to go, okay, one day, I didn't know what I wanted to be, but in second grade, I think you'll appreciate this. In second grade, the same question everybody gets is like, who do you want to be, or what do you want to be when you grow up? And I went to this tiny little Catholic school. There were 17 kids in our class. And, all the boys were like, I want to be a police officer. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a doctor. And all the girls were like, I want to be a teacher, or I want to be a nurse, or I want to be a mom, which is all great. But I got up and I said, I want to be the general counsel of Coca-Cola International. That was my answer in second grade. So it kind of gives you a kind of idea when I said I was like a weird, different little human. And so fast forward, I didn't become a lawyer because, and there's a long story there. We could probably do an entire episode on it, why that didn't happen. But what it made me realize in college is that I was really interested in human behavior. Like, why do we think like this? Why do we behave like this? Why do things from our past, also influence our future, sometimes and many times actually in a way that keeps us from our full selves, And so, getting into brand first advertising back in the day, I always tell people I'm not a spring chicken, I'm a seasoned chicken. This was in the 90s. And I was in Silicon Valley because I went to school in the San Francisco Bay Area and fell into advertising, and then realized I really love what I call the science of commerce, the science of human consumption, which is marketing, brand. Why do people make decisions to choose one over the other? And so I decided to then further my career in tech because I was in Silicon Valley, so it just made sense. And so I became one of those people and left the corporate world in 2006 as one of the top go-to-market strategy and marketing executives. And my last big project before I was unemployable, if you will, because I started my own company, was bringing what is now Netflix and Hulu to market, which is video over the cloud, which was a big innovation back then. And now, again, we take it for granted, right? Like, sure, Netflix and chill, or being able to put your streaming app on any device. These are the things. And so that's kind of how I came to be and how now I'm in this chapter. I did that 2006 to now. I've owned my own strategy firm and have also invested in many businesses. And now I'm kind of in what I call my author era, my author speaker, wear my author pants era, because I really want to be able to impart what I know and what's worked into ways that more people can access them. And so I know that was kind of a long answer to your question, but that's some of the background.
Yeah, it was so many connection points. I grew up in a small town in Kansas. Same. Yeah. So
Midwest. I mean, it's kind of, I always tell people like from the Midwest, I mean, it's like similar to a tiny little town in Hawaii. Things are different, but it's not that different,
Yeah. Yeah. And so many other things that I'm hearing about your story that I just resonate really deeply with. It's funny because you're talking about Netflix and Hulu era. the course that I'm teaching right now at USC for the Master's in Digital Media Management is all about time, territory, licensing agreements, user-generated versus professionally produced content, brand, and then also what kind of video on demand or linear TV or, different strategies you can use. And so we talk about the history of these technologies that we do take for granted and which ones make the most sense for a brand, especially as they're now all becoming their own full marketing media channels with advertising and so many other things. But not to get off topic, I love this concept of the unicorn team. And I think most people in business think unicorn company is $1 billion plus business, but you're talking about how any business can use these strategies and tactics to create an amazing team of people, what kind of people you need on your team, what to look for. I love that your book is also a workbook. So it's not just reading about it, but actually thinking about it, maybe working with your team, writing things down. And I want you to talk about this, but I also noticed that you had a CEO who read your book who just signed a $100,000 contract.
Yeah.
For you and your
Yeah.
team to take them through this process. So congratulations. That's
Thank
a
you.
testament to the strength of your construct, all of the knowledge and experience you've put into providing us with the same tools. So at what point did you decide to go into your author era?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't help it. But thank you for that, Ed, because if you get a chance to read the book, for those of you listening, it's in 3 parts. And the second part of it is about how to motivate not just others to rally behind your ideas, but for you to be self-motivated. Because whenever we have a new idea, whether you work in corporate, you have a traditional kind of job, you have your own business, or maybe you're side hustling and, navigating both. One of the things that we need is big energy to make big ideas happen. And so what the book is about like being able to really identify what's your highest energetic point, that even when you're facing pressure, friction, and noise, that you're able to first rally yourself. Because when I was gonna, this being my first book, and I have a master model that I call brand time. So team, identity, messaging, and experiences. Okay. And this book is one of 4 books I have planned to write about. And I chose the one about team first because when I was pitching this to the publishers, they didn't want this book. They wanted me to write a book on messaging. And this goes back to what I write about in the book when I knew this book was my idea. Like, I'm like, this is a big idea. And I want people to see even team in a different way of how it actually is, in a lot of ways, the catalyst and the power behind a brand becoming omnipotent. A lot of people always look at the visionary, right, and say, oh, yeah, the visionary is the person who's made this happen. And yes, of course, the visionary usually is the founder and seed of the idea. And without that, you don't really have an idea at all. But this is why 97% of ideas die on the vine, is because that particular person, the leader of the idea, now has to learn how to become a leader of a team over the different parts of the brand evolution of this idea. And no one was really spotlighting that. And as again, a successful executive and then owning my own business, I'm like, this is the framework and the model that I feel like is not truly being exposed in a deeper way. Like, because team is thought of a lot of times as kind of an operational type of role. And it is, but it's not. Actually, to me, everything is brand, everything. So brand is not just identity. It's like, who are the humans involved? And we're being taught, I'm not, but other people are being taught that you're not part of the team. As the founder of the idea, actually, you're the most important part of the team, because without you and your energy, it's hard to rally other people when people are busy. They've got their own stuff. They got their own vision for their lives. And so if you want to enroll them into your vision, you have to be that unicorn that is calling other people to the watering hole. So, to answer your question, I got this contract because this is the truth. I already baked that in to before I wrote the book. And if you read my book, you will actually see that I've set it up because I'm what I call, pardon me, a strategizing visionizer, which is, in the book, there are the 9 leadership types you need. And when I say that, one of the leadership types is called strategizing visionaries. So I always lead with strategy, and that's how I get to my vision. So being a strategizing visionaries, which in the book is also called the mastermind archetype of the leader, is that my energy comes from strategy. And when strategy is the role I'm playing on the team, even as the founder, but sometimes,
Mhm.
actually many times, as the consultant or advisor that is brought in to be able to do this, if I'm coming from that space, I get stuff done not just quicker than what it looks like to other people, but I'm also just in my gift zone. I'm in my genius zone. And then I go and pick the other unicorns that I feel will help and support the vision at hand. And part of what I'm getting feedback on the book about is like, oh my gosh, it's so exciting to even know as a founder. Some founders don't even have vision in their energy. They are what we call like strategizing mobilizers, or they are actually mobilizing visionizers. They actually are motivated by doing, but they've been told you shouldn't do anything. You should delegate all of that.
Huh.
That's, you're not being a CEO or a leader if you do that. And my argument in the book is that's actually what's setting up so many people to fail, is that we're actually not honoring their natural energetic like output.
Yeah.
And this is not, well, I would say I'm a big like art, science, woo, practical person because I'm an explorer of all the ideas. And the truth is that energy, it's science. It's like you need to find the energy. We talk about time as being the most important currency when you're bringing ideas to life. And I'm like, actually, no, because you can create all the time you want. But if inside of that time, you don't have the energy to actually bring it, to talk about it, to rally other people around it, it's still not going to work. And so these concepts where, of course, my publisher was like, just pick one concept. Let's just talk about energy. And I said, you know what? I truly believe that the intellectual, academic, and also entrepreneurs who actually want to, or innovators inside of organizations, who we also, I feel like, don't honor enough.
Mhm.
Like, you don't have to have a business. You can be the rock star inside of a company, and that's how you make a ton of money. I tell people all the time, like, you can be a billionaire and not a founder. Look at Sheryl Sandberg. She was never CEO of any company she ran, but she's a billionaire, right? Meg Whitman, who ran eBay, she did eventually become CEO, but she was a billionaire before she was a COO first because she was an innovator in that space. So again, these things that society puts on like, oh, you have to be the CEO, you have to be the original founder. Actually, no, I'd argue that's definitely not required to create a huge impact. And it's not just about making $1 billion. In fact, it's not about that. It's about what do you want to create? What do you want to innovate? How do you want to reimagine the way you contribute while you're here? I tell people like, I use Unicorn Team my whole life, like with my kids, with my husband. I picked my husband using Unicorn Team. Like, is he the right unicorn for me? Let's go through the model real quick in my head. So it's a real powerful framework. And I love that you said it's like a workbook. I will tell you, I wrote it not just so people would read it, but that they would use it. That was the goal. I wanted them to use it. And I hope you use it over and over again anytime you have an idea or you want your team to have this thinking, to put it on so that you're not struggling with explaining to them what you want to get done.
And I have to say, I've been in organizations where I've maybe been second command, where the founder and CEO had a very different idea of what it meant to be a leader. And this book just opens up, wow, okay, this is who she is. And she is the one who thinks she wants to be in the weeds. She wants to do the work. And some of the things that I was doing were more probably visionary and like being on the Intuit Small Business Council, going to conferences that were outside of this specific job, but with still being attention to the company. And so there was a lot of disagreement sometimes about what it meant to be a leader, what it meant to be a future CEO, if I were going to take that role eventually in the company, and what she was looking for. So this really hits home for me in terms of thinking about everybody has different styles, and you do need to find the people that will work well as part of your team. You need to know what people you need to have, which archetypes you need to have. And you also need to think about just because you're one type of leader doesn't mean that everybody else who's a leader has to mirror that. So yeah, please.
And you need a same page process because meaning like actually the third track in the book is about communicate. So it's navigate the idea, motivate yourself and the other people, and communicate so that you can get on the same page and make it happen. And a lot of times communication we know is the breakdown, right? That's why there is conflict. And conflict, which is actually awesome if it's handled the right way, without conflict, there would be no innovation, right? Because immediately, why does anything need to be innovated? It's because something's not working, right? Something is either a void or a violation of what could be. And so this book helps with that too. There's an entire chapter on how do you have a conversation where you have different ideas about how to get that idea to life. And sometimes it's about that. I'm telling you, it's because a lot of founders have been socialized that they need to be a certain kind of way. Or they're even told, oh, you're a micromanager. Like, you shouldn't be a micromanager. And I'm like, are you a micromanager? Which it could be true. They could be a micromanager. Or they just actually enjoy the details and they've been told they shouldn't. And Martha Stewart is a great example of that. I like to say, like, she's a mobilizing visionizer type of leader. And part of why she's so successful is because her level of standard and excellence in the demonstration and the doing of what she does. And, whatever people's opinion is about anybody, including you and me, we can't manage that. But as me as a brand strategist looking at Martha, I see her as like, I see why she's successful because she's fully in her lane. Now, I can't help if people whether even Steve Jobs, look at him. He's a visionizing strategizer, a VS. And most people said he wasn't fun to work with, right? But his level of standard and his vision of the future was so compelling and he was stubborn about it. People wanted to stay with it to create this different thing. He disrupted all these industries, but it wasn't just him because he's a jerk. And if it was just about being visionary and not nice, nobody would have still stuck with it. I mean, and I'm just saying, so we got to own our own leadership energy and then ask ourselves, where does that intersect with the right other humans? I say the goal of the book in the framework is what I call unicorn energy, which is this magical flow state where you and your team, whoever your team is, it could be part-timers, it could be contract workers, it could be interns, it could be your family, right? Because sometimes, especially if you're a small business, your family's helping out, packing boxes, doing things. It's about meeting where it's not a hierarchy. There's still a boss. So this book is not about you have to make hard decisions. You got to pay payroll. You got to do do hard things. But it's about when you're getting an idea to life, what is that flow state that allows that to happen where time collapses and all of a sudden everybody's like, whoa, how did they do that? How did they make that happen so fast? And I'm like, it actually wasn't that fast, but it appeared so because of the way we were planning for success. So just rounding back to what you said about the 100K plus contract, which I think will turn into $1 million opportunity, I baked that in knowing I'm a strategizing visionizer when I wrote this book. I wanted executives like that and business owners like that to recognize, oh my gosh, I want to implement this process into my company, my university, my nonprofit. And that was my goal when I wrote the book. And so that's the business part of me where people always also separate brand and business. And I'm like, no, you can have it all if you're strategic. So, yeah.
Fantastic. How do people know if they are one thing versus another versus a mix of two? So you've mentioned several instances of people being strategizing visionizer or, mobilizer.
Yeah, I got a solution for that too. It's called the Unicorn Leadership Type Assessment, or the ULTA. And it's actually, back to research and compiling information. After doing this work, what I call in an analog way with so many clients, I turned it into an assessment. It's actually in the book. So in the second part of the book, if you want to know your Ulta results and find out what you are. It's available when you buy the book and go to the link. Or you can go to unicornteambook.com and there's a link also to take the Ulta if
Oh,
you want to
fantastic.
know it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've mentioned a couple of leaders and their styles and why, even if they might have had somewhat difficult personalities, people still wanted to work with them and help
Yeah.
enact their vision. So I'd love to hear about some other unicorn teams that you've helped. And then to piggyback on that, you also mentioned that your husband, your children, you manage them from that. So I'd love to hear how you built your team. And did you have any course corrections that you had to make in building that team where you went, oh, I thought this person was this, but maybe they're not the right fit, or maybe this is actually who they are, and I can make that into the superpower for our team.
Oh, 1,000,000%. Let me just put it this way. One of my favorite quotes is by Damon John from Shark Tank. If you guys are familiar, Fubu, his, original brand. Damon John says, I don't fail, I get data. And one of the biggest, there's two things we need to protect as innovators. Okay. Number one is you got to protect your confidence. And in order to protect your confidence, your unicorn team of advisors and close allies are really important. They're still part of your team. They may not work for you, but like who are your mentors, advisors, peer groups that's the protecting your confidence piece. The second piece is making sure that this goes back to failure is failing slow is the killer of innovation and creativity. Okay. And too many people are committed to failing slow instead of failing faster to get to the win. So, to answer your question around like, how do you figure out, how to be that person? Well, you got to actually know that this book is not a playbook about perfection or becoming the leader everyone loves. In fact, you're going to find that to win, there are people definitely, you're going to kiss donkeys and jackasses. Okay. There's like this level of, there's like jackass, donkey, workhorse, and then unicorn. Okay. And a lot of times we are stuck in the workhorse mode, but we are the horse that people bet on, right? Which is great.
Okay.
But if you want to elevate to unicorn status, if you will, you need to understand that at certain parts of the idea coming to life, you actually have to be a workhorse, and that's okay. You just kind of like know though, like, okay, this part of it, because it's new, anything new creates pressure, friction, and noise. So you need to like know that, and you have to kiss donkeys and jackasses less across the way. And the more you commit to that, that's the failing fast part of it, because you will do that. And even now, I'll give you an example, like my book, I have been behind so many New York Times bestsellers in terms of their personal brand explosion using a book for it. But until I actually wrote a book and I was the author and in this seat, I could not fully know truly what it took, and I kissed a lot of donkeys along the way. In fact, I told people I spent a ridiculous amount of time, energy, and money to unpack even the publishing industry, because that's what I do. When I do something, if I'm going to bring an idea to market, I want to know how the factory makes the sausage so that I can win. And to do that, I had to plan I'm going to probably meet people who say they're great at it, because right now we also know anybody can say they're great at anything. That's the great thing about social media and the bad thing about social media, because now finding the real ones, right? Like the real unicorns is really, really tough. And also, this is why I wanted to write this book and get it traditionally published, because I knew that it's actually already hard to do, and most people choose not to do it. So it's already an indicator to me if someone's an author, I'm already taking them a little bit more seriously, because I know what it takes to put this work together. And so anyway, I just wanted to say that because I think a lot of people are like, okay, great, I'm going to read this book and then I'm going to pick the right people all the time. No, actually, you're not. I don't even still. But the cool thing is, back to protecting your confidence, I know why they didn't work, because I actually I'm so aware, oh my gosh, I see why I thought that person would work, but it didn't work. And now I'm more confident saying, hey, it's just not working. instead of waiting forever or having our ego attached to, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to bear down. I'm going to figure it out. And that's also why I talk about the book. You got to give everything about 100 days to truly see, is this person going to work out, and use this process to test it. Because sometimes it's not that they're not the right person. Like, again, we don't know what's going on with everyone in their lives. We actually don't. And they actually might have the skills and the energy for the role, but maybe something's happening in the background that you have no idea about. And 100 days is an investment of time, energy, and money on your part to really know, is this the right person? And a lot of times we've either been traumatized by a bad hire, and trust me, I understand this, or if you're a business owner, you don't have, or you feel like you don't have the luxury to waste money on somebody who doesn't work. I get it. But also, that's not how it works. If Steve Jobs, he went bankrupt, he got fired from his own company. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's that resilience, but using a process, which nobody I felt wrote about. And I was like, this is the process. This is the process where I was bringing very complex ideas and talk about personalities, like in the corporate world. And I know you understand this. It's like any new idea. And I was always in charge of strategic innovation, bringing a new idea to market. And I'd have to deal with the C-suite and literally like the line workers out in the field laying copper wire and fiber optics. And those are union people. And then there are C-suite people. And then there's middle management. And this book helps you navigate all those diverse opinions, values, perspectives. And it gives you a same page kind of like process to plan for success. So, I mean, I could talk about it all day long. I just feel like I was just really upset when I had to fight for this book. I'm telling you, the publishers did not get it. And I'm like, I don't need you to get it. But the people who go, oh my gosh, you are actually filling a gap that we couldn't name. Like, we couldn't really name it because it was like, everybody puts them kind of these categories of like, oh, operations, marketing, all the things. And I'm like, brand is all of
everything. That. Yeah, exactly.
And the humans are the ones that power it. And at the end of the day, innovation is innately human, even with what I call the triple A threat and opportunity, which is, AI, the algorithms, and automation. And I actually have a secret fourth A, which is Asians. I can say that because I'm Asian, right? Yeah. Like you can't outwork us, right? We're naturally attuned to getting work done. Mm-hmm. And so you can't fight those things. Instead, though, you can be a leader that is driving innovation because AI specifically only feeds off of human content. The laptop that your the OS is smart because it was built like a human with requirements and with like inputs, right? Otherwise, it couldn't work. That's the same. And here's why it's so important now for people to stand up and lead. And especially if you're building your own personal brand, which I say is like not just one of the trends right now. And I predicted this right. Absolutely. Well, even in companies are now realizing that their greatest brand ambassadors are their employees, exactly. Right? And so those employees are personal brands. They have a reputation of winning. And companies who want to retain top talent so that they can actually have an advantage with AI, that's the kind of thinking we need. But the noise out here in the media is like, hey, AI is going to replace things. I saw Bill Gates say like in whatever, 5 years or whatever, you're only going to work 2 days a week because AI is going to replace it. I said, okay, who's going to replace money then? Because I just want to know, as long as AI is also producing financial security and prosperity for us, great. These are the conversations that we could be using this book to have them so that we're not separating everything.
You're so speaking my language. I was at AI Mavericks this week, Tuesday, Wednesday. I ended up speaking on a panel Wednesday about AI education and the youth of today. And some people see a lot of negatives. And I say, no, in the near future, when we all have our own AI agents who are helping deal with the menial tasks, the appointments, paying the bills, that gives us so much more time to be human, to be present with our loved ones, and to live in that space where we can innovate, create, strategize, because that is part of, to me, being human. And yeah, you can use AI to figure certain things out, but it's going to use algorithms. It's using the input from human data.
Yes. And that's
So,
why creators
yes.
have to come forward. Because guess what? Right now, AI is just reading the status quo content, even authorship. This is why I'm kind of obsessed now since I wrote the book. I'm like, where are all the other authors whose AI needs to come in and read our work? Because otherwise, it's always going to be the same old, same old. And I'm not banging on, the authors before me who frankly look like the status quo cis white male, which, those books are great. Those are my top 10 referred books. But I started to realize, even as a woman, as a mother, as a leader, as somebody who's done, I feel very proud of some of my accomplishments in life. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think as I was writing this book that, oh my gosh, this gets to be an input for the future because AI will have access to it now because it's a published piece of work. And sometimes we don't remember or think about those things, but that's why we need this space to be like, hey guys, have you seen it this way? I love that you're talking about the youth because what's interesting is I was also I had a speaking gig this week as well. And we're talking about how Gen Z and what will now be Gen A, right? Gen Alpha, they are deeply desiring connection in a different way, but they were born into a world where they were literally connected to a device. It's like the new umbilical cord, right? Like that they are like connected to. And I'm excited for them now because I think actually because we're coming to this nexus where they're also going, I don't want to feel mentally unwell. They're going to want to fix that. And they're already fixing it by going a bit more analog and using technology and digital opportunities as catalysts instead of replacements for what we are. But it had to go this way, right? In order for us to see and to fight for humanity too. Like, to me, that's one of the most innovative things you can do right now is be more human, you know?
Yes, so much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So we could talk for hours.
Oh my gosh, for sure.
I mean, I'm also a mom and I have a child who's not really on social, who's not really interested in that thing. She is going to get her PhD in cognitive neuroscience. So she's on her own track. But I'm like, I have so much hope where people don't necessarily. But I want to ask about the process. You said you have 3 more books planned.
Yeah.
How long from deciding you were going to write a book to doing all of the exploration, the research, knowing what order you wanted to put the books in, fighting for that, find the right publisher? And I have to say also, thank you. I mean, I appreciate the good self-published book, but this is a lot more hefty to me.
Yeah, it does. It has more gravitas.
Something.
It has more gravitas. And again, publishing itself is an entire industry that is ripe for innovation. It's overdue. Like it's not even a donkey, it's a dinosaur. And there definitely is, when you come from the inside of it and come out, all of the myths that you might even think being an author, especially a traditionally published author, you'll go, whoa, that's like the silliest, weirdest, dumbest process I've ever seen. So to answer your question, I agree. I truly believe, I think especially if you're in the academic space, if you are a business leader in a corporation, we actually need those people to write more books. That's my opinion. Of course, I want to hear from entrepreneurs. Technically, I am one too, but I like to think of myself as I don't like to be called either one. I'm an innovator and a thinker and a strategist. And I can go into a big company and I can work with one person and I can use my skills to do that. So with a traditionally published book, it takes a minimum of 2 years, minimum, from you wanting to pitch a book to getting the book published. And if you don't know how the factory works, and it's not linear, that's the other thing. Anybody who tells you oh, here are the 5 ways you can bring your book to market, or you can launch your book, or you can write your book, all of it is not the deeper understanding of it. Because writing a book like this is deep work. Yeah. And we need space for that deep work. So in terms of my body of work, the good news is I had research, case studies, data, even from, I have another assessment that I've been running for 10 years called the brand archetype assessment. And so I had all this data on innovative thinkers and doers, how, like, what their main, archetypal background was. And so I had all that to begin with. But when I started pitching the book versus when it came to life, it took me 3.5 years. But now I know that it's not going to be that long, but it'll always take about two, because traditional publishers have a cycle, they're on their own, and publishers are not marketers, and they don't even care about brand. They care about publishing books. And there's another route you can go, which I'm really moving towards now that I know how, again, the sausage is made. Hybrid publishing to me is the next way to get, number one, you get the traditional publishing distribution and gravitas, but you have more autonomy as an author. And so I'm really like exploring that. And now I'm obsessed with making sure more people who have thought leadership write books, because it's not convenient to write a book.
Right.
That's what it's not convenient. It's definitely opaque as an industry. It's very confusing. And now that's kind of my new next thing, is like, I am so motivated to reinvent an industry that needs to be reinvented, because if we don't, we're going to be suffering from this content-titis, this superficial content-titis. I do not want to be picked apart on social media with these tiny little ideas that mean nothing unless you understand how they work together. And it takes the leaders to actually build the body of work so that the right content then is distributed.
Yep.
And I feel like we have a responsibility to do it. So
you answered my next question, which was, are you going to incorporate book publishing into Master Brand Institute or another entity that you decide to create? And I will be the first person to sign up.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. Well, let me tell you, I'm already there. So you're already ahead of it, because I'm serious. I had an amazing supporter of the book. She's also a professor at NYU, and she's published 3 traditionally published books, really good books. In fact, before I met her, I had read one and I was like, wow, but I didn't really know her. And she found me and she's like, Jen, the things that you're talking about with your book journey, because if you knew me before and when I did my book launch itself, I took 9 months and I started enrolling people into the book launch, because this is what the book is about, is like, how do you rally your team, my book team, if you will, into this idea that I wanted to bring to the world, and how I segmented my strategy to do that. One of those segments is you, and how we now know each other. But this other amazing professor, she's, from NYU, and she's like, I feel like I did everything wrong because I went to all these disparate experts. And I said, and I'm not saying that those were bad people. I'm saying that actually, because they don't have the way my crazy brain works, this person that I am, that my mother didn't know what to do with. If you fast forward, I'm like, there's missing pieces of this that need to be exposed, and we need to know so that we can be as successful as possible. And we need to have the patience and the communication skills to ask for the right things, even from the publisher. People think, okay, publishing, they have a marketing department, they have a PR department. No, they don't. They have people that say that they do that, and it's not their fault. This is not their core contribution. Their core contribution is the gravitas piece of it. The piece of like, oh, you are published by Penguin, you are published by Hachette, you're published by Harvard Business Review, right? And then even, oh my gosh, the difference between having a best-selling book by whether the New York Times or USA Today or Wall Street Journal, that's a whole game by itself.
Right.
It's different than even like how you write your book. So I'm excited that you want to write a book just based on the little
I
know.
I have multiple ideas for books.
Well, it's time. It's time. And I want to see more people have more diverse thought, diverse thinking, help us get to a place of please bring us back to critical thinking. Let's make thinking great again. Okay. Meaning like, because even in the past decade with social media, I feel like it's all about feeling, right? Which is great. I'm all for that too. But if we lose our capacity for deep thought, critical thought, having discourse in a way that's healthy and helpful for the future, to me, books help. They become a way, something to talk about and talk around and discuss in a very tactile way, instead of just even programs online or You know what I mean? It's just different. So yeah, good.
Okay.
Probably for your book.
Yes, I have two final questions. And then, of course, this is to be continued. But what is fancy lazy?
Yeah. This is my entire way of being. I always tell people like, they're like, you're so like you like so many things. And I go, no, I am. I like the nectar of the world. Like I am I love Star Trek. I love the San Francisco 49ers. So we're big sports people. My two daughters are named after Michael Jordan. So we're very like, if you get to know who I am, that's who I am. And I also love fashion. I had a fashion business when I left corporate first. And so I just love the beauty of life. And when I say beauty, not just aesthetic, in fact, less about aesthetic, but just like that somebody made something. Like I just so admire makers and creatives and innovators. So even beauty even in an AI tool that like makes my life easier, I see beauty in it. Like, oh, that is such a beautiful thing. So fancy lazy is kind of like my own personal mantra of how I approach life. And that is, I want my life to feel very fancy. And when I say that, not necessarily like, I don't need to be a billionaire. Actually, I don't desire to be a billionaire, although I've created billion and trillion dollar products. But what I do desire is a life that really reflects what I enjoy and pleasure. So that's the fancy part. And the lazy part is about like, I want to be able to stack my success in a smarter way. I'm very strategic. So I'm like, people work way too hard to have the life they want. And I'm like, so everything I look at is like, how can I make that fancy lazy? How can I get it like the big success, the fancy part, and then do it in a way that to other people looks easy, but it was worth doing. So the book that my lit agent is dying for me to write, I don't know if I'm going to write it, but is based on the fancy lazy idea of I work on the right hard things. So you're not going to avoid working hard for the things you want, but you should work hard on only the things that really matter so that you have the rest of the time and the space to do the things. Or another way to look at it is I work really hard to make my life easy. That's kind of like the other way to look at it. And so that's what fancy lazy means to me.
Fantastic. And that flows perfectly into the question I ask everybody. Do you have a family motto, a verse, a poem, a mantra that helps you stay motivated to all of the wonderful things that you're putting into the world every day?
Oh, gosh. Actually, we don't. The main thing is that we do have, if you saw my hallway coming into my house, we have this wall of photos of my kids. I have 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son, and my family members, my parents, my grandparents, and it has our values as a family at the top. So it's not necessarily a motto, but our family values are autonomy, justice, generosity, leadership, and legacy, and that each one of us has an opportunity to contribute to the life we're designing together in a way that's why autonomy is our top value, because it's like, I don't want to take away their identity in being their mom, but I want them to always know that they live in a home and in a family where we're going to be as equitable as possible. Not, things are going to like, I can't be there for all 3 of them all the time. So it's like, what is equitable? That means also presence, right? And then for generosity, my grandmother, who really is the matriarch of our family, she's no longer here, but her name is Generosa. And so, and I even bought a vineyard in 2020 when my husband and I, he's also from the same little town. It's a whole nother story because he was not my first husband, but we came back around and found each other later in life. And during the pandemic, we wanted to touch grass more and be, we grew up as farm kids. Like that's who we were. So we bought a vineyard in 2021 and we produce a wine named after our grandmothers, Generosa and Magdalena. And then leadership is about leadership of self. I teach my kids and I'm like, before you can lead others effectively, you have to really invest in leading yourself, always asking yourself, how can I show up in the most authentic way possible without being a total, like, don't vomit on people, don't ruin people's lives, like self-soothe, learn how to like take care of yourself. And then lastly is legacy. So it's like, I want to make sure that while I'm here in this meat sack that is expiring every single day that we're living, right? That while I'm here, that this little meat sack called Gen Chem did something that changed someone's life. And so books for me now and that type of thing is kind of the way that I'm seeing the best way to do that. But that's how we live in my house. And it's not perfect. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, you're like so. I'm like, oh no, we fight. We get irritated. we definitely have breakdowns, but it's more about like, what are we committed to in the bigger picture together? So that's mine.
That's beautiful. I can't wait to have further conversations with you, whether it's on this podcast, on my other podcast, or just one-to-one. Jen, thank you so much for giving your time to us today. And we will have jenniferkem.com in the show notes so everybody can know how to order your book. You have a book club, learn more about how they can book you as a speaker, work with you in other ways. So I just am so grateful that through this, intentional but interesting weave, we came together and were able to have this really, really rich conversation. And I know there's so many other things we have to talk about.
I can't wait. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to meet you, even if it's through the Zoom. And I'm sure we'll meet each other in person soon.
Absolutely. And thank you to everybody who is watching this episode or listening to it on your favorite platform. Don't forget to leave us a rating review. Check out Jen's book. And I'll be back again with another amazing guest very shortly. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.